In the age after the fall of the Orokin, the grand clade families of the Ostrons were cast wide across the solar system, roaming and homeless in their great floating markets. In this time, two young people were in love. The woman, Erfriha, and the man, Mirza. Erfriha was from the Yingbin clade, meaning great bond, a very old and wealthy compact of bonded families. Mirza, however, had no clade, his family having been shattered by the Grineer many years before. He was Cetus, meaning landless, cladeless, a body turned to dust, turned to motes, on a careless wind. Efria belonged to families within families. Mirza was alone. But to Efrihar, Mirza was a poet who had eyes to see the beauty of things and ears to hear the softly whispered language of the universe. "I know a place," he said, "where I may be homeless no more. I have heard a voice, and it leads me there. Come with me." But Efriha's father was a man made foolish by his wealth, and vociferously disapproved of their love. Mirza was cast adrift from the floating market that was home to his one true love. Erfriha and Mirza ran away together, as lovers do, and were never heard from again. Rent by grief, her family thought her dead. Her father passed away, clutching her cameo, at peace, thinking he would see her soon, in some moonlit afterlife. Decades later, ships entering ancient Earth's orbit were hailed from the planet's poisoned surface by an old woman's voice, gentle and knowing. Traders would call for her, greet her, offer the latest news on their families and lives, but never did they learn anything of this woman, save that she had a husband and they were, somehow, happy living on the toxic skin of that hostile world. The old woman would always ask those travelers of news of the Yingbin clade. Yingbin junkers came searching for a sign of their missing daughter. The frail voice of their long-lost child reached out to them, and there was much joy. "You will find us," her message said, "by the light of our love." Efriha bade them make their home around a magnificent Orokin ruin, promising them that it would be a source of prosperity for generations to come. The Yingbin arrived in their vast floating market. There, by a ragged coastline, winked a point of light. "Follow the brightness of the love between Mirza and I," said the message, "and be safe from all harm." The wrathful Grineer took umbrage at this, and sought to block their passage, but upon approaching that ancient Orokin tower, found their transmissions silenced, their engines turned cold, and their weapons reduced to lumps of dead iron. She was a being of the day, her husband a spirit of the night. Erfriha was a woman of the land, Mirza a man of the sea. Mirza understood the crushing weight of time in which air existed. In return, air gifted pieces of its ancient self to Mirza, old things shaped to near shapelessness by 1,000 years beneath the waves. Mirza was a man dedicated to finding the sacred in the forgotten, the neglected, and took wisdom from them. After many decades, Mirza had a small collection of such gifts, such that they could be held in two cupped hands. But in them he understood the lifespan of a world, and so he had struck an accord with the creatures of the sea. For her part, in her times alone, Elfriha came to know the birds and animals of the plains, and likewise struck an accord with them. Even the tortured Eidolons, creatures of this world and the next, left them in peace, and made the lands around the tower safe for the Ostrons. At the center of this place was the tower, and within the tower was the Unum, the voice, the force that had called Mirza and Elfriha there so many years ago for this exact purpose. But the Unum is a being for another time, and another story. The Ostrons named their village Carifomil, family and prosperity. Elfriha was overjoyed to see her clade again, but Mirza would not enter Carifomil, for he had no family save Elfriha. Elfriha was drawn to her clade, and Mirza felt no resentment. She would one day return to them. Mirza had known it would be so. Mirza took the things the sea had gifted him over his long life and took to his boat and sailed out across his midnight ocean. He returned those gifts to the deep, and himself to them too. But this was no death into which Mirza stepped, for a world is made of cycles upon cycles. Mirza stepped into his midnight ocean, falling down into it. And the deeper he sank, the larger he became. This is how the oceans of came to be the home of the 1,000-year fish, legendary, vast, reclusive, the rare sight of which changes men, one of the great ancient spirits of The spirits of the land felt Elfriha's sadness, mad with grief for the loss of their friend to the spirits of the sea. The accord broke down, the animals and Eidolons returning once more to wildness. And so the people of the clade, Yingbin Dunyai, rebuilt the great Oricon wall that had, in centuries gone by, ringed their gleaming tower, and never again ventured out at night. The villagers decided as one that their home would no longer be known as Carifamil, family and prosperity. From that day forward, it would be known as Cetus, landless, of no one clade, home to any who are blown as dust on the wind. Elfriha lived there the rest of her days, and for the remainder of her nights she held vigil atop the walls of Cetus, looking to the sea, and, some say, occasionally catching sight of a great fish, like an island in a midnight ocean, looking back at her with love. It is said that Mirza continued to watch over the deep, as he had always done, and Elfriha the land. Often she would stand by her husband sea, speaking in the language only those bound at the soul can know. When the day came and Elfriha passed from the world, her family buried her on the land. A great fish watched from the sea and kept vigil over her for 10 days and nights. When it sank beneath the waves, it was never seen again. Some say Mirza, the 1,000-year fish, waits to this day for their story to be retold, relived, that he and Elfriha, his great love, may one day be reunited again. This is Onko, Cetus archivist, with my translation of the tale of the wife of the earth and the husband of the sea. In the dying days of the Oricon, with forums and promenades still blood-wet from Tenno betrayal, a colossal sentient descended upon ancient falling from distant stars to deliver upon Oricon a terrible and final ruin. Tower upon tower fell to its weapons, but one withstood, the Tower of the Unum. The Tenno scattered, but one remained, Gara, she and the Unum, inseparable. The Unum, lodestone of our people, and subject of 100 stories herself. The Sentient was a deformed creature, twisted and massive, sent from some dark fold of distant space, a warped thing wounded by daylight. By night it was a terror, felling tower after tower, citadel after citadel. But by day it hid, blinded and pained. It was during the day that Gara roamed, yearning to strike it from creation while it cowered, weakened and blind, to safeguard her beloved Unum. But never could Gara find it. By night the Sentient was abroad, its titanic mass casting a terrible shadow across the land, the mass of it railing against the walls of the tower, yet kept at bay by the exertion of the Unum's colossal will and the sacrifice of her faithful. But such exertions could not be maintained forever. Gara yearned to strike out, to lash and tear at the monstrosity that threatened her love, but the Unum forbade it. At night the Sentient was at the height of its power, and Gara's light would make her the most tempting of targets to a creature of such profound darkness. Gara's death would be certain. No, a different strategy was required. The Sentient prowled and pressed and failed, never risking too much, for the Sentient could not reproduce. What it lost forever. It had killed many cities before, felled many towers, but this little one prevailed. Why, it pondered in many voices, was that? The Unum knew she could not defend forever, nor could her faithful throw their bodies against the Sentient in perpetuity. So she gave her followers some of her blood, her refined temple kuva, and they in turn gave it to the animals of the land. And the animals became an extension of her, and she became an extension of them. And the animals roamed and searched, and they found where the Sentient chose to hide itself. The Sentient sensed this subterfuge, and capturing one of the Unum's animals, opened it up for examination. And what little of the Unum that was present there lit the Sentient's mind like the dark star from which it had fallen. The Sentient, you see, could not procreate, but in the temple kuva it tasted healing, completeness, a future. It devoured each and every last Unum animal, but it was not enough. The Sentient turned its hundreds of eyes toward the tower with new understanding. It would not destroy the tower. It would become the tower. It would kill the Unum, take her place, and one with that healing palace give birth to a race of itself. Gara and Unum knew where the Sentient was. The Sentient knew the tower was the future of its race. The Sentient threw itself at the tower, no longer cautious, taking great losses and knowing the prize was worthy of it. Should it succeed, all losses would be replaced 1,000-fold. This is when, across the plains, the great pylons ignited for the first time. Sheets of energy sprung up between them, powered by the will of the Unum at their epicenter, trapping the monstrosity within. Loyal Gara, unwilling to heed inaction any longer, broke from the side of the Unum and flew out at night, her eyes on the Sentient mind. The Sentient, torn between its most coveted prize and the mortal threat, broke from the tower and turned back on itself to defend itself from noble Gara. But Gara's eyes were not for the Sentient, but for the glittering man-sized device resting just beyond the gates. It had not been there before, but it was there now. It swatted Gara from the sky, drew it to herself, meaning to end her life there and then. The battle was terrible. Gara sustained injuries she would not survive. But in her final moments, brave Gara seized upon the device her beloved Unum had crafted, seized it to her breast, and allowed the Sentient to draw her in one final time. Toward its body, toward its core, toward the seat of its intelligence. From within, the Sentient unfurled myriad feelers, probes, tendrils, viciously toothed and made for killing. They swept toward Gara violently, and the glass warrior made no defense. Her defense was her final attack. The device detonated, and the Unum cried out as night lit as day. The battle, the terror, was ended. The tower wall shook. The sentient's body shuddered, racked by a cacophonous energy. Forests fell as piece after piece, giant body after giant body, crashed to the plains and marshes and flatlands. Animals fled in spreading waves from pounding sky-high walls of dust, angered and whipped to fury by the death of a god. The last of Gara's energy arced from body to body, machine to machine, piece to piece, a horizon-wide applause of light, beautiful and terrible. And then, silence. All was still. The Onum's adherents wandered through the haze, calling for one another, lost in a miasma. Husbands seizing onto wives, children onto parents. It was over. Gara was never seen again. The sentients then became as they are now, senseless, wandering, yearning for a unity they sense more than remember. And the Unum? The Unum survived, alone, for centuries. Until today, when you stand here reading this. This is Onko, Sita's archivist, with my translation of the Gara legend.